We're going to start with the Broncos. 40 points to 6. They were beaten by the Dolphins last night. It was 50,000. It was a sellout. It was arguably the biggest game of the year in Brisbane. The fans were there. And off the back of St George being beaten, both teams had everything to play for.
Yep.
One team turned up, one team didn't. Gordy, a Broncos captain and a proud Broncos captain. Your initial thoughts on watching that game, on what went on, because Brisbane are done.
I was excited to watch it. 52,000, the buzz around all week. I did a couple of lunches and Dolphins were keen. They said they were fired up and Brisbane were ready. And, you know, especially with what happened to the Dragons. So I sat on the couch, watched that game, and I was waiting for it to unfold. But unfortunately, only one side turned up.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the story of the day. In the first half, it was going end to end and it had like a few stories, but Brisbane just did not show up.
Jammer, what did you take of it? It seems to be the tale of Brisbane's year this year. They were 3 minutes away from a grand final victory, and they now, unless every single scenario goes their way, and there is a lot of scenarios.
Titans will win today and just throw the spanner in the works and it's all back on next week.
But the bottom line is they have to win on Thursday against Melbourne by something like 20 points on the for or against, and they need a lot of other situations to go with them. So if we just look at them, that they're going to struggle to make the 8, your take on last night and just where Brisbane are at?
Yeah. Look, the build-up was absolutely fantastic, wasn't it? You know, this finals have come 2 weeks early. Then we were thinking Wayne Bennett's playing mind games. Is he going to put Katoa to the bench? Payne Haas coming back. Then the switch of Avarillo into the halves, the hammer in the centre, Trey Fuller, the excitement machine. So the build-up was fantastic, but just, you're right, there was only one team that turned up willing to play for 80 minutes. I thought a couple of the ex-Broncos boys played really well. Tavita Pangai Jr. and Herbie Farmworth, the hammer in the centres, I like that roving role that he played, and when he injects himself into the middle of the field. But for me, you look at the last 5 performances at Suncorp Stadium from the Brisbane Broncos. They lost to the Penrith Panthers, they lost to the Dragons, they lost to the Bulldogs, they beat Parramatta, just beat Parramatta, and they lose to the Dolphins. So it's been an incredibly painful fall for the Broncos. But I think when I watch them, they look like they're missing something. And I say that because when Patrick Carrigan scored to make it, to the first points of the Broncos, 12-6.
I think it was 12-6.
There wasn't much connection there. I think some teams go over the top with how they all pile in. But if you go back and watch that try, Carrigan sort of gets up and is just like, and then his teammates are just sort of there to, I don't know. It for me, it stood out. It stood out because it's so different, because we're used to, and when you think of the emotion of the occasion in a derby game.
He doesn't score that many. I remember last year when he scored that game, it was at the Gabba.
Yeah, they all come from everywhere.
Yeah, and 32 players. I don't know where the others come from. It was all the injured players even jumped up and gave him a hug.
Exactly.
And then you see that, and I think it was Asako, and then I think Tabi Waifodo might have scored the second. And then I'm thinking Brisbane need to get some points. Just sitting there watching, I'm thinking Brisbane need to get some points. I didn't notice it. I actually didn't notice it. So I'm going to go back and watch the clips.
Sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words, and that's interesting that you've picked that up, that there might be a lack of connectivity amongst the playing group. I think the scars from last year's grand final have now clearly been laid as brutally bare as possible for everybody to see. I think the fact that they went on that awesome run, they lost Flegler and Farnworth, to their arch rivals who've upstaged them yesterday. I think all of those factors have had a huge impact on what's been a very tough season for the Broncos, and I can't see them making the finals given the situation now.
I think we all agree with that, and this is the thing you've got to look at. There's already talk, and I just want to put this to bed straight away. Kevin Walters, and talking to people at the club today, will be the coach in 2025. So all these people are going to say, the coach is under pressure. Every coach is under pressure. Kevin Walters will not be sacked at the end of the year. He will be the coach in 2025. I've had that guaranteed this morning from the club. So
That's great
Why
news,
is the
and
club
so they
talking?
should.
yeah, but,
yeah, mate, but
you know
tell me,
what?
no,
Because the
mate. But why
pressure
is the club talking and why are you ringing them? That's rubbish, right? So he was 3 minutes off winning the grand final.
No question.
His job's not under the pump. The
I think
players,
he's under pressure.
No,
I think he's under pressure.
Of course, the whole place is.
Yeah, but
The whole place is, and the players are. So when I got asked who's under the most pressure, it wasn't Wayne Bennett, and it wasn't Kevy. It's the players, right? Because they're the ones that own their performance. In the end, Wayne's got this ability, right? When they lose, it's the players that weren't good, and when they win, the article's all about Wayne and he's a master. But the players did everything, and he's got this great ability. He's the best politician in the game, and you get someone that doesn't have friends in the media sits there, and they get shot all the time. The thing that I knew that if I'm playing in that game, it's the players. I would have felt the pressure. I felt it, and no one at that club, no player, right, has come out and owned it.
But Gordy,
I put pressure on Adam Reynolds, right? Kevy come out the next day. He's my captain. He stuck up for him. Kevy's been under the pump. Silence in cricket.
From the power
It
brokers.
was a test. It was
Do you
a
want a
test.
player to come out?
No, mate. It was just a test.
Yeah.
Right. Billy Walters said no to this station. His captain jumped straight in. I'd say no too. If one of my players said no to come on to this, it's one in all in.
yeah. Hey,
That's
Gordy,
the problem.
Well, there's a bit more to that story, Gordon.
Hold on. No, I'm just telling you.
Well, there's
right?
more to that
No.
story. You've shot off and you don't know the full story.
Your story's your story.
No, you're
I'm
saying.
just saying that I
no,
wouldn't do
you're
it.
saying
I
Adam
wouldn't do
Reynolds
it.
jumped in. Adam
I
Reynolds
wouldn't do
was
it.
asked by the club,
I
not
wouldn't do
him.
it.
He didn't want to
I
do it.
wouldn't do it.
Well, that's you.
You can say no.
The club actually asked him to
you
do
can
it.
say no.
No, I disagree
You
with
can
you.
say no.
So you're saying
You can
Reynolds should
say
have said no.
I got asked to go to do a thing on Thursday night.
Well, that's
I didn't
fine.
turn up.
Yeah,
You
but
can
that's
say
fine.
no.
Well, that's fine.
Dobbo, you can say no.
I
Don't-
realise that, but I just don't think that. I
just
don't
saying,
think,
that's
what do you
the
want
problem.
the players to do? You want
You've
the
got to
players
be
to
all on
come
the
out.
same page, and you've got to be one.
Well, they're clearly
you
not.
want to be
You've got to
united.
be all on the same page. You've got to be one in, all in.
So are
and
you
I know
saying
that
it's
from
the
winning.
players?
And I know, no. And I know that when you're not all on the same page,
Correct.
There was a push in the taxi rank. So, like, if you want to unfold everything, there's a push in the taxi rank.
Yep.
There's all that. So everything's happened, right?
Yep.
And then I've been at footy clubs, right? And the Broncos have had punch-ups, right? Where Wayne had to put on a fight night. Wayne put on a fight night. No, he did. The boys.
Was he
didn't
the
know his name.
referee?
The first ever time I went on a trip away, we're over in Perth training. There's a punch-up at training. That's how hard they went. No, let me finish. You're not talking right now, right? So then what happens is you do all that, and then we all got on the same page. And then all as I know is the sides that I won with are the tightest group of guys there. It wasn't talent. It wasn't talent. In 2000, we won because we were so tight and the team come first and your teammate was the most important person in there. And there was nothing that would separate us. And until they get that back, and clubs get that
Well,
back.
how do you get it back?
Clubs, it's hard work, it's discipline, it's friendship, it comes down to everything. And then who knows the recipes? Who does know? Penrith seemed to have it. Like, you watch Penrith, and I thought it was a carry-on. They must have been so tight with how they were and when they work hard. And Penrith, it's no miracle. It's how hard they worked. It's how much they trusted each other. It's on and off the field that they knew that someone had their back. One in all. And like Luai, then there was nothing said about those guys. And it was like a pack mentality. And I
agree
know
with that.
it's funny, but that's what happens in teams. And then Wayne Bennett always used to say it, winners have meetings, losers have
winners have
parties, losers have meetings, and they get around in small little groups and they start digging at each other. And until that stops, right, and until they stop leaking and until they all get together.
Half the side lives on the coast, Gordon.
man.
They're not even together. Like, you talk about that.
What's your problem?
Well, if you want them all to be together, wouldn't you have them all? You just say, boys, you're living in Brisbane. Half of you aren't living on the Gold Coast. Half of you aren't living
That's why we used to win, and that's why Brisbane had an advantage. Because when we're in Sydney, and that was their excuse, they're 40 minutes away, there's 50 minutes away, there's 60 minutes away. The Cronulla boys couldn't get together. The Dogs, because they all lived in Parramatta, they all live in separate areas.
So where does that come from?
Well, I
Where
don't
does
know.
it come from?
Brisbane, we all live close. We all did everything together. And it does bond you. It does actually put a bit of steel in your relationship.
The reality of buying a ticket on the ride that is life as an NRL head coach is that you're going to come under scrutiny. That's every day there is pressure. And we've heard Billy Slater said it during the State of Origin series. Pressure is a privilege. That's why all these men go and want to do this job, because they love the game and they believe that they can have an impact and enjoy success. and set a legacy at a club. So for Kevy, I'm glad that you're saying Kevy is safe, Dobbo, because he should be, because of his
100% he should
achievements
be.
last year.
Yep.
And the power brokers at the Broncos need to be aware that the old boys campaigned heavily for Kevy to get in there because that's how much time and respect they have for him. If they were to try and go down a different road and put pressure on Kevy, I think that would have a detrimental effect that would set the club back years.
Well, there
He's
are,
signed
leaks
for
in,
next
there are leaks
season.
in that board that are saying, he has lost the support of the old boys. Glenn Lazarus was in there last night hugging him. I can tell you, it's absolute BS. Yeah. And it's come from different boards of the board. I will say this, and Gordon, you can back me here. In 2018, the board and the chairman decided to sack Wayne Bennett, right? That was their choice.
Bad move.
They entrusted Paul White to do it. Paul White's no longer there. Last night, 6 years on, guess what? Wayne Bennett made a mockery of that side. The same board and chairman's still there. So I'm just telling you, maybe they need to look a bit further than the coach.
No. It's just the players.
So what do you want the players to do?
Well, no, it's everyone, Gordy. In fairness, it is.
I know.
When you have a bad season, coaches can't be immune from scrutiny.
I get it. I think they need some new faces at trainer and they need hard work, right? Normally, and when you talk to blokes that are super successful and they're at the great clubs, the highest paid, their captain, their best players normally are their best trainers, right?
Yep.
So from all reports, Payne has Carrigan are great trainers. They've got to have those young kids that want to compete with them, right? So leadership at the club and the players will dig themselves out of it. I've been in enough route. I was with Wayne when we lost 10 in a row. They don't have even the great Wayne Bennett didn't have the answers, right? They don't, but the players need to just take some ownership. Of what they've
yeah, that's fair.
What they've tossed up.
Absolutely, they do, because it's not a too dissimilar team on paper. No. Yeah, they lost some players from last year's grand final. We know they've got injuries, but Gordy, to your point about this little bit of a lack of connection. Well, that goes back to my point from earlier around the Carrigan try. You watch it, and it's when you put those words that you said in that vision, it sort of goes, well, there's something clearly going on there. How you get that back? In terms of the geographical location of the playing squad, look, a lot of teams have that issue. But for me, I think for the Brisbane Broncos, they need to clear their differences from last year's grand final. I still believe that would hang over you. There's a grieving process there. They had something and then they lost it, something that they strive for so long and worked so hard to get, and almost the imagined riches of what would come from winning that grand final, and that has now gone and disappeared. But what you can do to bring that connectivity back, you have your leaders in the room that filter through how we're going to act and behave on an everyday basis. So we're going to celebrate little wins. Yeah. You know, when our teammate does, we're all going to celebrate, and it starts at training. We're going to celebrate all these little things, and that then builds and breeds, and it has a huge flow-on effect. But at the moment, the Broncos, they're not doing that. And Gordy spoke about some fights that happen, and that happens. That's high. That's testosterone through the roof, and you actually want that. You actually want that. As crazy as it sounds, you want people that are confrontational.
Michael Jordan fought with every one of his teammates. Luke Longley spoke when I was at South. He had a punch up with everybody. And if Michael Jordan didn't have a punch up with you, you didn't train hard enough. You didn't get in his grill.
Well, the Broncos aren't punching on at training. That's one thing. And that's probably a valid point. The aggression has how they train and prepare.
Well,
might
Gordy,
be the answer.
Gordy, you said before, if you were in that Broncos team, you'd feel the pressure. But what would you do? Whenever I felt pressure, I was all in. I felt like I felt better under pressure. But what about you?
I tell you one thing that I'll change is every second Tuesday, the forwards, we're getting together and we're going for a meal somewhere. We just go. So it has to be a pack. It can't be
twos and threes and fours.
That's right. So everybody goes. And I knew that the backs and the pretty boys, they love to go play golf, right? So, but then they'd be playing golf on the day. Sometimes I'd join in there. But Webby, Thorny, all the guys would go and get a pizza parcel. We'd go somewhere. We'd all throw in. The young kids would come. You'd chip in. And we'd all sit there. And then all of a sudden, I don't believe you have to like everybody you play with, right? But you got to respect them. But if you love the bloke beside you, if you got more respect for, you're going to do more for him, and that's just human nature. So I think getting to know Brad Thorne, Tony Carroll, Petro Sivanasiva, Shane Webke, Dane Carlo, Brad Myers, all those young kids, and then you don't know them at training because you're not talking to them. You're not sitting there. You're not chewing the fat. You're not asking them how their day is, right?
Is that why you love me so much?
I don't.
Can I?
And I don't
You
even
haven't got to know
respect
me.
you. So
Hey,
even
I
if
just
you
want you
don't,
to
you have to
listen to
like
Kevy.
everybody, and you have to. But yeah, that don't like.
Did you get the
carbs.
drunk-
Want
did
you
you
to
get that
listen to
drunken
Kevy's
chicken?
presser, guys. Just quickly, I want you to listen to Kevy's presser. Here's what Kevy had to say after the match.
Pressure every week playing at the Broncos, and players have got to understand. So that's just not part of who we are as a club or as a team. So,
Kev, you said it's not part of who you are as a club and team, but that wasn't a one-off tonight. You've had some pretty poor losses the last 3 months.
I wouldn't say that.
What about the Bulldogs game here? It was pretty bad.
Well, it wasn't great, but what do you think? You seem to know a lot about everything.
What do you mean I seem to know a lot about everything? I'm just asking you. You're saying it's not part of your team, but it's
not,
happened
no.
more than once, Kev.
Yeah, it has, which is not. That's what I'm saying. It's not great. So, I've got some really strong thoughts of where I think, but I'm not going to share them today with anyone. That's for myself and the players and the staff, at the Broncos.
I don't think he has to share what's gone wrong with the public in that press conference. I think that's in-house. I think he was in his right.
Hoops is the one because Hoops has sat there with so many coaches, win, loss, have relationships. Hoops, you've asked tough questions.
I thought Kevy handled that well. That's not the forum. When you've had a loss of the magnitude that the Broncos suffered yesterday, the worst thing you can do as a head coach is walk into the press conference and start riffing in a variety of different directions and apportioning blame on wherever you think the faults lie. So I thought Kevy handled that well. I thought the journo's entitled to ask a couple of questions because they have had some bad losses at Suncorp Stadium in recent times, and it's a legitimate
losses. They've had three losses.
Yeah,
where
well, that's a legitimate
points
question.
on them. This
but
year.
40's the new 30. Like 40's the new 20. Like, well, mate, it is. Like, mate, have a look at Parramatta. Have a look at sides playing for the final. They scored like 40 points in like 40 minutes. It's the Holden Cup. Remember the Holden Cup where they all scored 40?
The 20s.
That's these kids.
Hey, just quickly on
Don't worry about defence. It goes around the house.
Just quickly on Kevy and Dobbo's there, who's come out and said his job's secure. If I was Kevy, I'd be making some phone calls because that's not a good news story. Dobbo's like we all know, Dobbo's mail can be.
He gets it.
Kevy's just at home going, "Oh no, what's happened?"
Let's talk about the Dragons.
I'll give him my number.
44 points to 40. They were beaten by Parramatta. They scored 5 tries in the last 10 minutes. It was a disgusting performance. I love Shane Flanagan post-match. Here is him in the press conference.
It was a disgraceful first half. I apologise to the Dragons fans, sponsors, everyone. It was just not good enough. And I've got to take ownership of that. It's just not good enough. For a Red V jersey, that first 40 minutes was just not acceptable. We need to be accountable for it. Like the score in the end, and that gave us hope. Oh, you only got beat by 4 points. No, I'm not going to cop that. Well, unless I go to the local A grade, get some players, I won't be making any changes. I don't want to be rude, but I've had enough. Thank you.
Got up and walked out.
That's
I
good.
love it. I love that. To me, it
I
hurt
love
him.
coaches having a spade.
Yeah,
It's so good.
Shows
hurt
they
him.
care, and he does care.
Yes.
And the performance was putrid, given what they had to play for. And Parramatta haven't set the world on by any stretch this season.
It is the only job, and this is with no disrespect to journalists, it's the only job you go there and someone's sitting there and he's shaped like the pencil that's in his hand and he starts questioning you on how you played. And I'd sit there and I'd watch a couple of them and I'm thinking, to me, that'd be like me going and sitting to the boss of the Commonwealth Bank and talking about finance. I have no idea, so I stay out of it. These guys come and they sit and they ask the question. That's why Flano and the coaches sit there, ones that are played, and just go, okay, mate.
I don't think Flano was snippy at the journos.
Oh,
In
no,
fairness,
no,
I think
mate,
Flano
he's
was
just
snippy
snippy
at
at
the
everything.
performance. Yeah.
Yes, mate, he's a prickly pear, and he'd be embarrassed with the way his team played. And I think I actually do believe that they have a right? And if I'm a Dragons fan, I'm sitting there going, good on him.
Yep.
Right? So he's basically just gone, players, that was you.
Well, look, there was a lot at stake, wasn't there? And, when you look at that game, I guess in the context of the season, Para had nothing to play for.
Yep.
They're about next week. And the Dragons had everything to play for. And if you look at Shane Flanagan, when he's come into that Dragons team to start this season, nobody would have given them a chance in hell
No one predicted
of
they'd
making
make
the
the eight.
finals. And he has done such a fantastic job. And it was there for the taking. And I think the players did let him down. You know, he spoke how disgusted he was in that performance. He cares so much. And, you know, he's been on a long journey, Coach Flanagan, you know, considering that being taken away from the game and come back in. And he's been thinking about this moment for such a long time, for years, been building up. When I get my hands on a team, I'm going to turn them around. I'm going to do everything I can. And we're going to, you know, he came out at the start of the season, laughed in the faces of everybody that said they were going to get the wooden spoon. And just yesterday's performance, he has every right to be livid, because there was a lot riding on that for the Dragons, but also personally for him with the journey that he's been on. There's a lot of pent-up frustration there. He hasn't had that opportunity to coach, and his team comes down to that, and they just weren't there. And you know what, I like what he said about the thing, like, oh, they only lost by 4, and no positive light shone on that performance. It's not. Get rid of it.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Gemma, given the way they played against Cronulla and then the way that they played yesterday, at this time of the year, the good coaches train their sides as though they're preparing for a Melbourne Cup. They want them to absolutely peak September and the first weekend in October. They're all striving to try and get there. I'm wondering if the Dragons readjusted on the run the way that they're training, because they realised, hang on a second, we're now a genuine shot of making the finals. Have they been really pumping a heavy load of training into the players? Because their last 2 performances, particularly against Cronulla down in Wollongong last Sunday, they were so flat.
Yeah,
no energy at all from the get-go.
I know what you're saying, Hoops. I think when you assess the Dragon season as a whole for the previous 23 games that they've played, the gap between their best and the worst is quite significant. It's a huge gap. We've seen them have some dreadful performances. We've seen put some really good
ones.
Melbourne
not long ago in Melbourne.
Down in
Broke a 25-year drought.
So they've got that in them, and I think that's the frustrating side. So when you look at training methods, it's always an interesting one. Like, obviously, this weekend of football, it's been a case where teams need to rise to the occasion. And that's what I think the Dragons are in that boat of, like, we've got to rise to the occasion, rather than you look at a team like Penrith, they'd fall to their best level of preparation. The Dragons are in that boat, but they just didn't rise to that occasion. And whether it comes back to training practices, Flanagan would look and assess and speak to his staff and say, like, well, why were we so dire? Like, he's lambasted the players, and rightly so, but he would look internally and go, well, what did I get wrong here? What can I learn from this? If we're in this situation again moving forward, do we need to dial it down in training a little bit? He'd definitely be across that.
Yeah, Hoops, you make some really good points, because you freshen them up, and that's what the Dolphins did. They just spoke about freshening them up.
Mm.
Well, I know that you needed to work really hard in the last month, because you need to be freshened up when the finals, and you can only sort of hold that for about a month. So maybe they are on a heavy workload, and that's what you do, where you do a bit more than what you normally do. So then when you get to the finals and they start freshening you up, that the fitness and the conditioning can carry you for like the 4 weeks. I'm not a sports scientist, but that's what used to happen with us. Like, we'd be training really heavy now. No, really heavy, and you get to the finals, and then it's just...
Then you taper.
Yeah,
well, I know
taper off.
Melbourne and Penrith and the Roosters, they would have put
heavy.
a really heavy block of training into their squads
About a month
over the course of the last 4 to 6 weeks.
And
With
maybe
a
the
view to
Dragons a month
peaking.
ago, after they beat Melbourne, thought that they were going to get there, so they have been.
Yep.
And then thought, because of the way Parramatta were going to play, well, they thought they might have won that one.
Mm.
And then the local derby, well, you just get up for that game anyway.
Yep.
So there was a few, toss of the coin games.
You could argue that
they failed.
Flanagan's going, well, I'm going to prepare us like champions.
Mm.
And if that's what champions team do, like, this is where we're going, then this is what everybody's got to get used to, because this is what will happen next year when we're contending. He's done that before with the Sharks, so maybe he goes, this is my recipe for success. So get on board with it, because we will play finals. Unfortunately, the performance yesterday, a lot of questions to be asked.
They have performed far better than any expectation of anybody other than Shane Flanagan. So I understand that it's 2 weeks out from the finals and they were in contention. So it's a huge tick regardless. And his off-season recruit so far for next year. I know he lost Zach, but, with what he's been in the market, I know with Cook and also Val Holmes going there, he's still in the market as well. Like, there's going to be... It's on the up. There's no question St George are on the up, and they're going to get better. But I suppose they're probably ahead of the curve of what we thought, and we expected that they were going to be in the 8 with playing Parramatta yesterday, that they'd get the job done.
Jammer hit the nail on the head with the difference between their best, and I would say their best was when they went to Melbourne and upstaged the Storm at Amy Park, and their worst, which was getting 60 put on them by the Chooks. On Anzac Day. I would go yesterday as well at Combank Stadium. Like, perfect conditions, flat and fast, warm day, and they really were. Yeah, they weren't in the contest.
Maybe that is Hoops. You spoke there about the Anzac Day, a big occasion. They didn't.
Well, they haven't. I guess they haven't had a lot of experience at big occasion games in recent years.
Yeah, so big occasion Anzac Day, big occasion yesterday, and let themselves down.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an area there for, like, in terms of preparation, how you deal with that, like the high level games, the pressure games, the important games.
Yep.
Well, the fact is that I think they're done. I don't want to put the dead.
I've got the crystal snowflake.
Mate, you wrote the Tigers off. They weren't going to win another game.
How are they going?
Right. I'm just going to
How are the Tigers going?
You said they weren't
You
going to
said they
win
would win
another
another
Tigers
game.
going? They don't even know what team they want to be.
Dobbo,
How are they going?
Dobbo,
We'll
I'm
get
just
to that
looking.
as well.
I'm just looking on Ladbrokes now to back the Dragons to make the 8 after you said that, because they're absolute guarantees.
Shut up, Ginger. We're going to take a break, come back. This is Sunday Sin-Bin on Triple M.
Shut up! The foot is on Triple M!
There's been headlines this week around the West Tigers and Balmain Tigers, who are obviously a foundation club dating back to 1908, wanting to go it alone. And Gary Leo is a member of the Balmain Rugby League board. And look, he's more than entitled to his view, but the reality is it can't happen because Balmain aren't financial enough. I'm an old Balmain Tigers supporter for life, and I would love to see Balmain back, but it's just never going to happen. So I think the best thing that everybody can do for the West Tigers is all try and stay united and stay on the same page, because they're not going to be able to turn the tide of a couple of spoons and a disappointing and tough period if everybody isn't trying to remain united. So on that front, I think Gary just got a little bit carried away and probably said too much, and it all blew up, but it's never going to happen.
Gee whiz, it made some headlines for a couple of days, and Balmain did come out and put a statement out there. There must have been some truth to it at all. It might not happen, but it would be clearly their choice, Balmain, from what we were reading, that they would like to go it alone if they had the financial support.
Yeah, well, we'd all like to do a lot of things in life, but unfortunately, if you haven't got freight...
support, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Me neither.
If you haven't got the freight, then you're not in a position to do anything.
Well, even that, Hoops, let's be real. Like, would Volandis and Abdo allow that? Like, would they want, if they split and Balmain put in a bid for a license, I don't know if they'd get one.
Yeah.
Even if they had all the money that was necessary.
Well, they'd need at least $100 million, and they haven't got anywhere near that. They'd be flat out. I'm not sure they'd have enough money to run their own side in the New South Wales Cup, which costs $1 million a year. So.
Even if you look at things like pathways, I think it would be thanks but no thanks from the NRL
yes,
point of view.
I think you raised some very fair points, Jimmy. I understand why a lot of rusted on old school Balmain fans still feel passionately and strongly about the club. It's a proud club. It's got a rich history. You know, they've had some champions of the game like Wayne Pearce, Steve Roach, Benny Elias, Gary Jack, all of those great players. Ellery Hanley back in the day when they went on that run and made the 1988 grand final. But it's just, it isn't going to happen. Like, it's not in the realms of the real world. I understand why Gary's disgruntled and I get that he's frustrated, but at the same time, it just isn't going to happen. And to your point, I couldn't see Andrew Abdo and Peter Volandis going for something like that.
Let's talk about the 6 o'clock Friday night game. Seagulls taking on the Bulldogs, and the Seagulls were too good. 34 points to 22. It was a very good performance. I suppose the big question now is, do they get Tommy Turbo back in time? I think it's a
AC
shoulder
joint
injury. AC it's a grade 3 or something like
Grade
that.
3 AC joint.
Yep.
He won't play against Cronulla at Brookvale next Sunday, which will be an awesome game. That's already sold out, I think. And then he will be back for week 1 of the finals, but he's going to have needles, and it'll be about pain management.
Yeah, wow.
It's an important injury. Anthony Seibold was talking to the Triple M Saturday Scrum yesterday. This is what he had to say about Tommy Turbo's injury.
Yeah, he's got a grade 3 AC joint injury. So there's nothing wrong with the shoulder as such. It's a pain management issue. So he won't play against the Sharks, and he'll be available to us for the first week of the finals. Like a stack of players, mate. Play with AC joint injuries. Obviously, the nature of their game. Probably predisposed to that sort of injury. So it's something you can manage. It's not a drama.
Has he got one of those machines when you want to do a prank call or something? You want to disguise your voice? Like True Lies.
Yeah, he's got a pretty
sounded like Oscar.
pretty recognisable voice.
Yeah, clean your throat.
now-
Sounded like he was on speaker at loudspeaker or something.
Yeah, like one of those, those when it just doesn't quite work. Jimmy, don't laugh.
It was a really good performance from Manly. I mean, a lot of people thought, Bulldogs 6 o'clock game. I think it was a record Friday night crowd. Is that right, Hoops? I heard you mentioning that
this year.
Wow.
And 6 o'clock record for a 6 o'clock game.
Friday night game. Yeah. It looked amazing out there. It's probably the Bulldogs' worst performance of the year, if we're honest with you. Manly really showed a lot of grit. They travelled, and it was probably one that the Bulldogs will be regretting now because they've been in such a purple patch of form of recent times.
Well, the Dogs had won 10 games straight at Accor Stadium this season. Hadn't lost a game until Friday night. I think they'd been up for a long while, Jammer, and you can probably speak to this because you're in and around the club. They'd been to New Zealand. They'd travelled to Bundaberg to play the Dolphins. They'd been on that 5-game winning sequence. But full credit to Manly. I thought they did an outstanding job. Their middle forwards, Taniela Paseka tore him to pieces in his first stint. And then he was backed up as well by Hamoli Olakwatu, who was enormous as well on the right edge for Manly. So I thought it was a great win for the Seagulls. For the Dogs, if I'm a Dogs supporter, I'm not too worried, Jammer, in that I just get the feeling as though emotionally they'd been really riding that wave. And I don't think that loss, I actually think it could be the kick in the arse they need.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, Hoops. Firstly, I thought Manly was sensational after what they saved up in the last 60 minutes against the West Tigers. It looked like a team that wanted to respond, that they've been handed their arse, and they've had some strong messages about consistency, playing for the 80 minutes. I thought their middle forwards were absolutely exceptional, and especially when you consider the start to the game, the Bulldogs scored before Manly had even had a touch. So they were behind the 8 ball to begin with, but they stayed true to their plan. So big credit to Manly. They're obviously... Their hopes rest on Tommy Tebojevic. So interesting to see how he manages that shoulder. Probably a couple of needles before the game half time as well, and not much load in training. Just on the Dogs, look, what we've come to expect over the past couple of months, we expected a lot better performance. The way they attack with their defence through the middle just wasn't the same, and Manly really limited their yardage game. Just when the Dogs were looking to come back into it, Cherry Evans kicked that 40-20, which was absolutely a sensational
I think that's
play.
The best 40-20 I've ever seen.
That was amazing, and Kickow had gone close. I think he had that try taken off him, and the Dogs looked like they were coming, but that just took it out of them. The Dogs will learn from that, though, and I think you mentioned the travel. I think in the past 6-7 weeks, they've been to Townsville, Bundaberg, Brisbane, and New Zealand. So I think it's a timely reminder that, you've got to be up each and every week, especially as we approach the semis.
Yeah, I think if the Dogs got ahead of themselves, which I'm not sure that they have, that's the greatest learning curve. Before the finals, they've gone there. They played one of the heavyweights or like one of the dark horses. They probably thought they were just going to turn up and do the same thing, but you got to obviously change your role. Like you're playing against Tommy and DC, like you're playing against a really good side. So I reckon the Dogs, if they learn from it, it'll probably be one of those losses that, you don't like losing, but sometimes you need to have it. Just to reset.
The Tommy injury's big for the Seagulls because
massive.
They've beaten every side in the top 8 bar Cronulla, who they play next Sunday. this year already. To me, when they're at full strength, they are a side who could go on a run in September. But I think with Tommy sustaining that injury, and I know he's going to have needles in, he's going to play through the pain. They have got great options. Young Lehigh Hopewadi, who has demanded inclusion in that side. Gordy, there's not a lot of him, but the way he moves, he glides across the ground. I love his background story. He's obviously from a famous rugby league family. His brother Will went on a similar trajectory when he first came into the NRL. He was playing State of Origin very quickly and handled it. But Lehigh, the way he moves, his speed, he fears nothing or no one.
Well, I don't think a Hopewadi's ever been scared of anybody. That's one. Yeah. But like it looks like that he's leaner than his old man. Like John was such a big presence, such a big body out there on the wing, and like pretty much like a Wendell Sale, a Lottie Takiri. Like they were like a damaging battering ram. But he looks like he's lighter and got more. Like I don't know, but it looks like he's probably the fastest Hopewadi. Like he can move.
He's silky the way he moves across the ground. Great story. Like he's a Beacon Hill Bears junior. So he's a local junior, come out of the Manly system. He went to St. Augustine's College, across the road from Brookvale Oval. And he looks a real player of the future. Yeah. So Seibold's got a big decision to make in terms of, does he put Tolu Cooler at fullback, or Lehigh is actually a fullback? He can play there too.
Well,
give him a shot, wouldn't you?
You give the young kid a shot. It's 1 week. Tommy will be back in week 1.
Well, you know, I don't know if they asked Seibold on the Saturday show about whether or not, because watching Tommy play, it looked to me like he'd picked up a lower limb injury before the head knock and the shoulder. And
got a knock on his knee.
He wasn't moving as effectively in the second half as what he was in the first. And I think because Saab had gone off, I think they left him out there. They had Calder on the bench, and I think they were just letting Tommy run it out. But there did seem to be something. Well, there was significant change in his involvement in the first 40 minutes. As opposed to what happened in the second half.
You're spot on. Look, Anthony Seibold was asked after the game when Tommy picked up that knee injury, if he had thought about bringing him off. He said no, because it was a knock, and I think they'd strapped it, but there was no structural damage or anything to be concerned about, so he decided to leave him out there. But I think you're right. The fact that Jason Saab had picked up a syndesmosis injury, that meant they did have Tolu on the bench. He had gone onto the field, and it had meant a major reshuffle in the back line anyway. So that was why they didn't go down that road. But with the benefit of hindsight, I'm sure they're probably thinking, well, it would have been good leading by that amount anyway. We could have brought Tom off.